He thought it would be just another quiet night. Just him, a blinking cursor, and the kind of silence that settles in when the world outside forgets you exist. Kevin's dorm wasn't much. A desk buried in papers, a bed that hadn't been made in days, and the faint blue glow of his laptop casting long shadows on the wall. The room smelled of half-eaten food and tired routines, unremarkable, entirely human. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his eyes, and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Outside, the hallway was still. Inside, only the soft hum of electronics reminded him he hadn't gone completely still. And then, the door creaked open. Not with urgency. Not like someone rushing in. But slow. Intentional. Like the air itself was making room for what was about to enter. He turned, half expecting a roommate, or someone who'd lost their way. Instead, it was her. Amanda. She stood in the doorway barefoot, motionless, framed by the dim light behind her. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight reflecting off water. And her eyes, wide, alert, unblinking. She said nothing. But she didn't need to. Because in that moment, as her gaze swept across the room over the clutter, the chaos, and finally, to him something shifted. She wasn't seeing a classmate. She was seeing something raw. Unfiltered. Human. And neither of them knew it yet. But that single moment, in that imperfect, forgotten corner of Earth, would become the line they never stepped back from. Later, when she reached out. When her fingers brushed his jaw. When she whispered that she wanted to understand. It wasn't science. It wasn't protocol. It was the beginning of something neither of them were supposed to feel. But they did. And once it began, there was no going back. The dim light from Kevin's laptop barely held the darkness at bay. His dorm room, cluttered with energy drink cans, unfolded books, and laundry that had long given up on organization, breathed a quiet kind of chaos, unapologetically human. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, exhaustion sinking into his bones like cold water. College was supposed to be a launch pad, he thought. Not a descent into caffeinated madness. The soft hum of his laptop fan was the only sound in the room. Everything else had gone still until the sharp click of the doorknob shattered the silence. Kevin turned, expecting maybe a roommate prank, or someone who'd got in the wrong room. What he saw instead made his breath catch. Amanda stood in the doorway. Barefoot. Motionless. Her violet hair draped over one shoulder, catching the sterile dorm light like strands of starlight. Her skin shimmered faintly opalescent, not quite reflective but somehow alive under the flickering fluorescent above. She wasn't just watching him. She was absorbing the moment, eyes wide, glowing faintly as if they held galaxies within. She didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just stared. As if she'd caught him in a moment he was never meant to be seen in. And maybe she had. Kevin didn't move. Amanda, he asked, his voice softer than usual. Still nothing. Only the quiet hum of machines, the crackle of cheap campus lights, and the charged stillness between them. It was the first time she had ever seen him like this, unfiltered, raw, stripped of the social armor humans wear around others. No posture. No polish. Just a guy in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, caught mid-collapse in the middle of a long night. Amanda stepped forward slowly. Her movements were smooth, almost unreal, like the frame rate of the world had changed around her. Her eyes scanned the room, the desk buried in papers, the half-eaten sandwich on top of a textbook, the tangle of bed sheets that hadn't seen neatness in weeks. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. Steady. Measured. I did not expect this. Kevin let out a half laugh, half sigh. What? Me dressed like a goblin at 2 a.m. She didn't answer. Her eyes, silvering and unblinking, remained locked on him. This state, she said at last. You are unstructured, relaxed. That is not how we are told humans behave. Kevin blinked, a little thrown by her tone. Not accusatory. Not judging. Just fascinated. Well, he said, shrugging, welcome to off-duty humanity? Amanda tilted her head slightly, and her tendrils responded, twitching, sensing, reading. He didn't know what they measured, only that they never moved without purpose. I've never seen this version of your kind, she murmured. Kevin glanced around his disaster of a room, then back at her. Yeah, this is the real us. No suits, no lectures, just survival. Another pause. Then she nodded slowly. Thoughtfully. It is honest. That one word hit harder than he expected. Honest. Not messy. Not embarrassing. Just honest. Amanda stepped further inside. The door clicked shut behind her. No apology. No explanation. Just the quiet presence of something not quite from this world, standing in the middle of everything familiar and making it feel entirely new. And in that moment, Kevin felt it. Not fear. Not awkwardness. Just the strange, unspoken truth. This night was going to change everything. The room felt smaller somehow, as if her presence had folded the space inward. Amanda stood still, just beyond the threshold, her bare feet barely making a sound as she stepped forward. Every movement was careful. Not hesitant but studied, as if each object around her carried weight or meaning yet to be understood. Her eyes scanned the clutter, the open books, tangled cables, and the half-eaten sandwich wrapped in fading plastic. There was no judgment in her gaze. Just quiet observation. Her tendrils stirred, twitching slightly in the air, responding to sensory input invisible to human eyes. Kevin could almost feel them searching the room like unseen antennae. Then came her voice, soft, breath-thin. I did not expect this. Kevin let out a small laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, welcome to the jungle. She didn't smile. Just kept looking. Slowly. Your state is unstructured. He shrugged. We call it being off-duty. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful, like two minds trying to meet at the edge of two very different worlds. Amanda took another step in, the door sliding shut behind her with a muted click. And just like that, the room was no longer just his. There was a problem with my housing assignment, she said. It was reassigned unexpectedly. Kevin blinked. Wait, so you got kicked out? Temporarily. The error will be corrected in the morning. I was told to await relocation. His eyes narrowed. So you don't have anywhere to sleep tonight? Amanda's gaze didn't waver. Correct. Kevin let out a slow breath. He looked at the chair. Then the bed. Then back at her. You were just walking around? Looking for a place. I considered remaining in the library. It is climate stable and always accessible. He gave her a look. Amanda, it has chairs. She nodded once. They are acceptable for brief intervals. Not for sleep, he muttered. A pause. Then he sighed, motioning toward the room. Look, just stay here tonight. I'll figure something out. Amanda blinked. Her tendrils stirred. "I do not wish to disrupt your rest cycle. You already kind of broke into my room," he said with a tired grin. "Might as well finish the job." She looked around again. This time, her eyes moved slower, as if she were starting to see past the chaos and into the rhythms behind it. The lived-in energy. The quiet patterns. "You may take the bed," he said. "I'll manage with a chair." Amanda turned to him, tilting her head slightly. "That does not seem logical. This is your designated resting area. It's called being a decent host." Another pause. Her gaze lingered on the small chair for a moment, then back to him. "In that case, I will remain standing until a more optimal arrangement is reached." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "You're seriously gonna stand all night?" "I have done so before," she replied, completely serious. He exhaled through a half-laugh. "Yeah, let's not do that." Amanda didn't move. Just watched him, eyes quiet and searching. "You're different here," she said after a long moment. Kevin blinked. "Here? In this state? You are not as composed, but not unstable, either. Just unguarded." He swallowed that observation slowly, unsure how to respond. But something about the way she said it, like it was neither compliment nor insult, made it feel oddly intimate. "You can stay, Amanda," he said again, softer this time. "Seriously?" She nodded once, slowly. Not out of obligation, but like she was accepting an unspoken invitation into something more than just shelter. And in that silence, something subtle shifted. Not the air. Not the space. But the gravity between them. Amanda moved through the room like a careful observer of a forgotten world. Her steps were silent, deliberate, as if the floor itself might whisper secrets if she pressed too hard. She wasn't just looking, she was decoding. Every object seemed to carry meaning: the tangle of charging cables, the bent corner of a paperback, the half-empty can of soda fizzing quietly beside a glowing laptop. She paused at a small humming box tucked under the desk. Her fingers hovered above its surface, sensitive to the vibration within. Her voice, when it came, was soft, even reverent. "You preserve food using internal cooling units." Kevin glanced over from the bed, half amused. "It's a fridge, Amanda?" He let out a small chuckle, but she didn't smile. Her expression remained thoughtful, unblinking, intent. This wasn't small talk. To her, this was discovery. She opened the fridge with quiet curiosity. The soft pop of the seal gave way to a wave of sterile cold, and she leaned in slightly, eyes moving across its contents with quiet fascination. Her fingers grazed the surface of a plastic bottle, tracing the condensation as if it were some ancient code. "Biological sustenance," she murmured. "Preserved by artificial climate control. Functional. Primitive." Kevin raised an eyebrow, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're welcome to it, but don't expect elegance. We do survival, not style." She closed the door with careful precision, as if sealing something sacred. Then she turned, eyes scanning upward now, drawn to the cluttered bookshelf. Her hands brushed across the spines like someone tracing history with her fingertips. "You store knowledge in bound organic matter," she said. "Fragile. Subject to degradation." Kevin shrugged from his seat. "That's part of the charm." Amanda selected a book, flipped it open, and began to read silently, rapidly. Her eyes flickered across the page with unsettling speed. Within seconds, she closed it again, placing it back exactly where she found it. "You already finished that?" he asked. Yes, she replied simply. Kevin blinked. Okay. That's impressive. And a little terrifying. She didn't react to the tone, only nodded, continuing her slow orbit around the room. Her gaze landed next on the laptop, still aglow with a half-written paper and a paused cooking video in a split screen. Amanda stepped closer, bending slightly to examine it without touching. "This is your interface to external data?" she asked. "Data, distraction, dread, depends on the day." She tilted her head. "So much dependence on devices. Is this standard?" "For most of us, yeah," Kevin said. "We lean on tech more than we'd like to admit." Amanda straightened, her voice growing quieter. "Where I come from, memory is internal. Absolute. Once we learn something, it stays." Kevin's expression softened. "You don't forget anything?" "No." He looked away for a moment, then back. "That sounds heavy." Amanda's brows drew together slightly, her tendrils shifting in the air. "Why?" "Because not every memory is worth keeping." There was a silence, low and full, like a breath held in the dark. Amanda didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was distant, like speaking from a place far older than her years. "In my culture, forgetting is equated with failure." Kevin leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes forgetting is what lets us survive." Her gaze lingered on him, quiet, but intense. Not questioning. Not defensive. Just listening. Then, without a word, she returned to the bookshelf and let her fingers drift across the titles again. Not studying now. Just feeling. Something had shifted in the air. A stillness that wasn't empty, but expectant. As if the room had begun to listen back. Amanda lingered near him, her gaze resting not on his face, but on his open hand, palm up, relaxed, unaware. The room was still. The kind of stillness that came not from silence, but from anticipation. Her voice, when it came, was no louder than a thought. "May I touch your skin?" She didn't ask it like a scientist asking permission for a sample. She asked it like someone on the edge of a threshold, unsure what stepping forward might change. There was a pause, not of hesitation, but reverence. Kevin looked at her, his pulse quiet but present. He wasn't used to being seen like this, like he was unfamiliar terrain. He nodded once, slowly, offering his hand without a word. Amanda moved closer. Not with confidence, but with care. Her fingers hovered just above his skin for a moment, sensing something beyond temperature, some silent rhythm beneath the surface. Then, lightly, she made contact. The air seemed to shift. Her touch was cool. Not cold, but crisp, like polished stone warmed faintly by sunlight. She moved slowly, tracing the ridges along his knuckles, the faint lines of his palm. Her touch was deliberate, but not clinical. She wasn't measuring, she was listening, with her fingertips. "It is," she breathed, "warm." Kevin didn't move. "So are we," he said softly. Her fingers lingered, brushing over a small callus near the edge of his thumb. She paused there, studying the texture, the way his skin told a story without saying a word. There was a silence, thick with awareness, no rush, no need to explain. What began as curiosity had become something else. Amanda didn't pull away. And Kevin didn't want her to. She traced the inside of his wrist, where the pulse lived just beneath the surface, steady and fragile. Her eyes, still glowing faintly in the low light, rose to meet his. No calculation in them now. No hypothesis. Just presence. And in that moment, he wasn't a subject. And she wasn't a visitor. They were simply two beings, suspended in a moment that neither quite understood but neither dared disturb. The hum of the laptop faded into the background. The shadows on the walls no longer moved. Even time seemed to quiet itself, just long enough to let something delicate unfold. Her voice returned, barely more than breath. I did not know touch could feel like this. Kevin's throat tightened slightly. Neither did I. And still, she didn't let go. The air between them had shifted, subtle, but real. No longer just the quiet between two people, but the kind that settles when something unspoken begins to rise. Amanda stood still, her gaze flicking once toward the narrow bed, then back to Kevin. Her voice was calm, as always, but this time, there was something fragile beneath it. I have no designated place to rest tonight. Kevin blinked, the words sinking in slowly. It wasn't what she said, it was the way she said it. Like it wasn't just an update, but a quiet admission. He ran a hand through his hair, then gestured toward the bed with a half smile. You can have it, he said. It's not much, but it's better than the floor. She tilted her head, studying the mattress, then the stiff wooden chair near the desk. Neither are optimal for shared rest, she said plainly. But your body requires more regenerative hours than mine. Efficiency would suggest we share. The room held still for a second. Kevin looked at her, uncertain if he'd heard her right. His voice dropped a little, more cautious than surprised. That's not how humans usually do it. Amanda didn't flinch. She only asked, softly, why? He opened his mouth to answer, but the words weren't ready. They had to come slower, filtered not through logic, but feeling. Because, he said after a breath, it means something. Amanda went quiet. She didn't argue. Didn't question. She just stood there, as if listening to that meaning, not the words, but what lived underneath them. Her tendrils moved faintly, like they were absorbing the weight of his hesitation. Then she gave the smallest of nods. I see. The moment felt delicate, like a thread pulled between them, neither tense nor slack, just present. And then, her voice again. Not logical this time. Not efficient. Just gentle. Would you mind, she asked, if I still stayed close? Kevin met her eyes, and for the first time, he didn't feel like she was observing him. It felt more like she was reaching toward something. Something unspoken. Something that didn't yet have a name. And in that silence, surrounded by glowing screens and tangled sheets, he found himself not thinking. Just feeling. They sat side by side, the bed creaking just slightly beneath their combined stillness. The soft light of the laptop flickered against the walls, casting dancing shadows that moved more than either of them did. The show played on, but neither one was following the plot. The dialogue became background hum, something distant, unimportant. Amanda's eyes weren't on the screen. They were on him. She studied him in silence, the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers fidgeted near his knee, the way his gaze kept drifting without focus. Then, almost like a thought slipping into the open air, she spoke. Your temperature has increased again. Her voice was quiet, unhurried. Observational, but not detached. It carried a new texture now, something softer, as if her words had started to feel the weight of their own meaning. Kevin's response came just as gently. Yeah, well, this is new for me too. She didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she leaned a little closer. Not enough to alarm, not enough to startle, just enough to erase the space between them. Her shoulder brushed against his, and the sensation was barely there, but it landed like thunder. Her tendrils moved with a shift, lightly grazing the edge of his sleeve. There was no pressure in the contact. Just presence. Something quiet. Something searching. Amanda inhaled shallow, surprised. The kind of breath one takes when the body reacts before the mind understands why. Kevin didn't move. His focus narrowed to that one point of contact, that one quiet moment stretching longer than it should have. Her proximity wasn't overwhelming. It was delicate, like the calm before something important. She didn't pull away. And neither did he. "Are you cold?" he asked, the words barely audible. Amanda shook her head, slow and small. "No," she said. "Just aware." She turned her eyes toward him, and this time, there was no analysis in her gaze. Only stillness. Only attention. "I can sense the change," she continued. "In your heart. It accelerates when I'm near." Kevin gave a breath of a laugh, not sharp, but soft. Not defensive, but unguarded. "Yeah," he murmured. "That happens." She blinked slowly. "Does it happen with all humans?" His reply came after a beat, quiet but firm. "No. Not with everyone." Amanda didn't respond. She simply looked at him for a moment longer, then turned back toward the screen. But she didn't shift away. She stayed close, tendrils resting like whispers near his arm, breath settling in rhythm with his. And though no more words were spoken, the silence between them said everything else. She didn't ask with words at first. Her fingers moved gently, slowly, until they found the edge of his jaw. The touch was light, barely there but deliberate. As if the act itself carried more meaning than anything she could say aloud. Kevin stilled. The pads of her fingers traced a subtle curve beneath his cheekbone, down toward the line of his chin. Her touch wasn't cold, but cool, like something carved from still air. And yet it held warmth, not from temperature, but from intent. From care. Her voice followed, soft enough to melt into the quiet between them. "This sensation, your reaction?" She searched his eyes, not with calculation, but with something far more vulnerable. "May I understand it further?" The question didn't ask for permission in the way humans often did. It was simpler. Purer. As if connection, for her, was something sacred and something still being learned. Kevin's breath hitched. Not because he was unsure, but because he'd never been seen this way. Not by anyone. He met her gaze. The glow in her eyes reflected more than light. It held wonder. And something else he wasn't ready to name. He answered in barely a whisper. "Yeah." She leaned in. And when their lips met, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. But it was honest. Soft. Careful. Intentional. Like they were both discovering something new, frame by frame, breath by breath. Her lips pressed to his with a curiosity that wasn't distant, it was intimate. Personal. Her tendrils, once reactive and analytical, now coiled gently around his wrist, not to collect data, but to stay connected. To feel. The room seemed to fade around them. Not into darkness, but into something quieter. The kind of stillness that didn't demand to be noticed, only felt. He didn't think. He didn't try to explain it to himself. There were no questions. Just this, her presence, her shape, the quiet ache in his chest that said this moment was never supposed to happen, and yet, it was the most natural thing in the world. Two silhouettes, one human, one alien, folding into the same breath, the same space. mismatched in every way, and yet, in this suspended moment, somehow whole. They didn't pull apart. They didn't need to. Because something unspoken had already passed between them. And in its place, something new had begun. The light from the screen had dimmed to a low, steady glow, casting faint pulses that rose and fell like a second heartbeat in the room. Shadows stretched long across the ceiling, undisturbed, like they too had settled in for the night. They lay there in stillness, not stiff, not tentative, just quiet. Their bodies weren't tangled, but close. Connected. Amanda rested lightly against him, the weight of her form barely there, yet unmistakable. Her breath moved in soft rhythm, each inhale slower than the last, as if she were sinking herself with the warmth that now wrapped around her. Kevin didn't speak. He didn't need to. His arm, resting near her side, shifted only slightly with each rise of his chest. He was aware of everything: the brush of her hair against his collarbone, the subtle curve of her hand near his ribs, the delicate loop of her tendrils that had unconsciously coiled around his wrist like threads of thought trying not to slip away. She hadn't said a word since. But presence spoke louder than dialogue ever could. There was no pressure in the silence. No need to fill it. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncertain. It was full. Weighted with something gentle. A recognition. A question unasked because the answer had already arrived in the quiet between them. Amanda's skin, once unfamiliar and cool, had taken on the faint warmth of his. Not perfectly human. Not entirely foreign. Something in between. Something that now belonged to both. Kevin let his eyes fall shut, not to sleep, but to feel the moment more clearly. To feel her. The calm in her breath. The softness in the way she didn't pull away. The peace of just existing, here, together, no expectation, no direction, just this. And for the first time in a long while, the world outside the room no longer mattered. What mattered was here. And now. And her. The first light of morning slipped gently through the blinds, laying soft gold across the room like the touch of a memory. Shadows stretched and softened, no longer sharp, no longer still. The world beyond the window stirred, but inside, time had not yet resumed. Amanda watched the light move across Kevin's bookshelf. It crawled slowly over the titles, illuminating the spines of old paperbacks, catching on the worn edges of pages too often thumbed. The dust in the air shimmered like it had weight, floating with quiet purpose. Her voice broke the silence, not suddenly, but naturally, like it belonged to the light itself. "This night has altered something in me." She didn't look at him when she said it. Her eyes remained fixed on the glow, as if she was still trying to understand the shift happening inside her. There was a pause. A breath. "And her voice softened even further, "do not wish to return to before?" Kevin turned his head, just enough to see her more clearly. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, subtle, warm, and a little surprised at how easy it was to feel understood in silence. His reply came not with weight, but with clarity. "Me neither." And nothing more was said. Because everything else was already there. In the light. In the stillness. In the way neither of them had moved. The campus lay quiet beneath the early light, wrapped in the hush of a world just beginning to stir. The sky above them was soft, still painted in the faded blues and golds of a night not yet ready to let go. Trees swayed gently overhead, their leaves rustling like whispers too old to remember their source. They walked side by side, unhurried. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was whole, filled with a subtle rhythm of shared breath and unspoken thoughts. Their steps matched without effort. The gravel beneath her feet crunched softly, each sound fading into the stillness that blanketed the path. Amanda moved with an ease that hadn't been there the night before. Her tendrils floated behind her, catching the wind in slow, graceful arcs. The breeze lifted her hair slightly, revealing the soft shimmer of her skin beneath the morning light. She didn't look out of place anymore. She looked as though she belonged. Their hands brushed once just barely. Neither spoke. Then, a second time. This time, the contact lingered, and held. Fingers met. Paused. And then, quietly, simply, clasped. Not with tension. Not with urgency. But with understanding. Kevin's gaze drifted sideways, catching the way the golden light played across her face, casting delicate shadows beneath her eyes. Her expression was unreadable. Not because it was cold, but because it was full layered with something new, something neither of them had words for yet. He didn't try to name it. He didn't need to. His thoughts came in fragments, soft and sure, like a quiet voice rising from somewhere deeper than memory. She came from another world. But it was here among the clutter, the flaws, the small, human chaos, that something beautiful began. She wasn't meant to understand him. And he was never supposed to let anyone get that close. But somehow, between the quiet of a shared blanket and the first light of morning, they found something neither of them had words for. Not love. Not yet. But the fragile beginning of something real. She came to study humanity, observe it, define it, maybe even control it. Instead, she touched it. And for one night, in the dim glow of a cluttered dorm room, a girl from another world learned what it meant to be seen. And a boy with tired eyes learned he didn't have to be alone. Their story doesn't end here. In fact, this might only be the first chapter. If you felt something tonight, stay close. There are more moments ahead. More truths waiting in the silence. And more stories like this tucked between stars and skin waiting to be told. Subscribe to the channel, and come back for the next encounter.